Okay. How you feel?
Tired? Let's do this.
Yeah, I am so we have with us a guest, our first guest. We have
What?
Xavier Carrigan. Is how do you say your last name?
Carrigan.
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 Okay.
Okay.
And you go also by MXC.
Yeah, those are just my initials, Michael Xavier Carrigan, but MXC. That's right.
All right, and you are running for Ohio's 5th district. And we find this interesting because you are a truck driver, and it's kind of like, we've gotten together. You came into our Facebook group, and you had mentioned yourself, and like, this is fantastic because we have one other truck driver who's running. I'm sure some of you know, is Joshua Collins, and
That's right.
this was news finding out. Wow, we got another one. So this is awesome.
That was crazy.
Yes.
It really blew my mind.
And I hate to hit you with this out of nowhere, and I should have told you before we went live, but there's actually 3. There's one in Miami, Florida.
Oh, okay. So we need to get a hold of that person.
Yeah, we do.
I will make sure he gets in contact with you guys. I'll get him on the Facebook group too.
There you go.
All right. So you have quite an impressive resume. I know because you had described this. So we listened to your interview with Shank Uger on TYT, and it's rather impressive. I mean, you went through what is it? A DJ, a bouncer. You were, you're also a teacher, or like describe what is it that you've done in the past, because it's quite a vast amount.
Yeah, it is quite a vast amount. It's I was actually thinking about this the other day before I actually started telling you a lot of the different jobs I've done. It almost feels as if though when some people talk about fate, it almost feels as if though my entire life I've been criticized, told of what I was doing was wrong, but I went from job to job to job to job because I wanted to experience as much as possible. And I wanted to be able to understand where people are coming from, and I'm also not afraid to tell a boss to go fuck himself. So
Of course.
if they're not treating me right, if they're not treating my coworkers right, I'll leave because my coworkers are getting treated right, even if I am. So it almost feels like fate that I've reached this point to where I'm running for Congress, because I get this feeling it gives me the ability to really relate to all the people I hope to represent. And so I've done things like early in life, I was a baseball umpire, and I did newspaper route for a very short time. I even did some picking up trash on the side of the highway with the Department of Transportation. And then as I moved on, I was a bouncer at nightclubs, and then I like the guy who checks the IDs at the door. I was a janitor at the nightclubs. I eventually became a DJ, a bartender, a nightclub manager. I was a computer hardware, computer software technician. I have done graphic design work. I've done promotions for nightclubs, promotions for special events, DJ'd weddings, DJ'd karaoke, DJ'd strip clubs. That's right, gentlemen. Hope you're having a wonderful time
Ooh,
out there. We're gonna have
yeah.
Sapphire
Yeah,
coming up
love
that
it.
center stage. But and then later in life, things transitioned wildly. I became a bodyguard. I've done cage fighting. I have done cage fight announcements. I have. I went through one day and I didn't even get all of them. I met a body piercer. I was a body piercer for 3 years. And a lot of people start to ask her, just like, well, how did you do all these things? And I said, well, one, I'm 42 years old. But two, I had 3 jobs that were kind of my primary jobs. I've been a DJ for 23, almost 24 years. I still am a DJ today. I still get requested to come out and do special events. I was a teacher for almost 10 years. I taught in Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia. I taught at Arizona State University, Ohio State University, and then a couple of smaller colleges in Ohio. And what else have I done? Oh, and this might come up in conversation later. I actually worked for Uber Advanced Technology Groups. I actually rode around and did the testing in the self-driving Ubers in Arizona.
Wow. So you got an update on that from way before the people started really, I mean, realizing that this was going to become a thing in our, technological society. So that's
really cool. Like,
absolutely.
wow.
Doing all of these different jobs that is a vast amount of experience and various amounts of fields. And I think, and this is my belief, a lot of politicians who they're career politicians. They go to school, they go to Harvard, and they get these degrees, political science degree, business degrees, and they're just not normal people.
Yeah.
Like they don't have no like attachment to reality. It's just they go to the school, boom, they get a job. Probably somebody in their family hooked them up, and here they are, and they're writing laws, and they have no idea what's happening. I mean, I think being able to have experience in real life jobs as you do, I think that is something. I think that's something a lot of politicians, at least now, at least maybe for those like the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, of course, like AOC used to be a bartender and et cetera. I think that's what we're beginning to see. And with your life experience, that I think that's refreshing. I think that's rather refreshing.
Can I buttress off what you're saying at the very end there? And that is, from what I was told growing up, what I learned in my history classes, in my oh god, not ethics. What's the word I'm looking for? Civics classes and social studies was back in the day. Being a representative, it wasn't this prestigious job that everyone wanted. Most of the people didn't even want the job, because what it would mean is you have to go travel for a month or 2 months just to get to Capitol Hill in order to represent or take the vote of your constituency, your neighborhood, your state, your locality to Capitol Hill. But now, of course, with technology the way it is, it's what, a 2-hour flight, at most a 5-hour flight for people to get to Capitol Hill. And so now it's become a career, a job. And that whole idea that being a representative as a career disgusts me. It turns my stomach. And I have a lot of stomach to turn. So with that in mind, I think that the reemergence of progressives, because progressives used to exist in America, but the reemergence of progressives is truly telling how out of touch those people who claim to represent us are. They do go to these prestigious schools. They do get the jobs from their daddies and their mommies. They are they're privileged, and they sit there and they're just like, well, why can't you just go out and buy a $10,000 car if you wrecked yours? Why can't you just go stay in the hotel for $500 a night? Why can't you get that $300 haircut? And when they went after AOC over an $80 haircut, I'm like, my sister pays 60 to 80 bucks, and she's an accountant at a university. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely absurd. So I'm sorry, I kind of I trailed off there.
One question I really want to ask, and I'm really curious. when we watched your other interview, you said you worked for the DOT. So, what work did you do for the DOT, and did that lead you to go to truck driving?
No, 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 not at all.
No.
Actually, the DOT job, and I'm glad that you asked that because when I do say it, it was literally a part-time job for me to pick up extra cash as a teenager. That's all
Okay.
it was.
Okay.
So it for me, it was like one of my first, I guess, bits of responsibility in my late teenage years. You know, you go out, all right, you're going to go out and make some money, and that way you earn your money. Okay, well, great. So I went and did that. Now, how I got into trucking was actually an act of desperation.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of people as well. I never thought I was going to be a truck driver. And when I did get into truck driving, I think I can sympathize for those who do and they believe this that, you know, oh, I'm just going to get in and just be like a local driver, you know, and then you get into school and you realize, oh, wait, I need to be over the road for a month.
Yeah,
So,
because
Yeah,
nobody will hire you because you don't have any experience. The
yeah,
only ones
that's
that
right.
hire are the big companies, and you learn as you go. You get screwed over right off the bat.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And it is kind of a thing like that. It's just so hard for those two people to get in, which is why, you know, when they say, well, we need new truck drivers, we need new truck drivers. Well, I mean, if you just made CDL school more affordable, maybe you would have more truck drivers, but you have to break an arm and a leg just to, in order
Yeah.
to get a
So
CDL.
I will say this: I believe some of them are overpriced, but then again, there are a few. Yeah, sorry. So some of the schools I think are way overpriced, and then there's some other schools that are like just barely budgeting, where they're
Yeah.
making a small profit. But I mean, you got to think of how many kids come through there, and they still have to keep their trucks up to DOT standards as well. You know, they can't just let us drive and go take tests in them in pieces of crap. You know, they got to keep them all up to date, and that takes a lot of money.
Yeah, but then, you know, and the way I feel about that is like that could easily be subsidized. And I don't feel like they're
Oh,
subsidizing truck
yeah.
driving training at all. And they make these claims, you know,
Well,
it's like, I honestly, like you see more subsidization for corporations and these major carriers than
of
you do for
course.
people trying to get into the trucks in the fucking first place. But yeah,
Well,
as a matter of desperation, for me, you know, I don't know about you, but it's like I never thought I was going to be a truck driver. I was getting evicted out of my apartment, and you know, I was working at a Steak and Shake as a dishwasher at the time, and you know, I had my
mm,
family and my you know, my girlfriend that's, you know, she's like, yeah, you need to do something, and you know, that just like, well, I mean, there's a, you know, a plethora of jobs available for truck driving, so
yeah.
yeah, that
Well, you know, with a lot of these companies, they they get the subsidies. These large corporations. I mean, we most of us on the left, if not every single person on the left, understands that it is capitalism for the poor, socialism for the rich. That's really what it boils down to because the corporations, these mega companies, even some of just like the regular large companies, when they ask for subsidies, when they ask for handouts or bailouts, they seem to always get those. But when people are sitting there going, like a regular working person's like, you know, hey, can you help me just a little bit? It's a bigger struggle for anyone to get a handout or a hand at all. And so when I listen to somebody like Bernie Sanders say, we bailed out the corporations in 2009. Why the hell can't they bail us out now?
yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have much of an incentive. I mean, you know, being able to boost their stocks enough to where they look like they're profitable. You
Well,
know,
so
I
can I
mean,
disagree with what you
yeah,
just said there? That they wouldn't find it profitable. They wouldn't find it immediately profitable. But any company should be able to look at the bigger picture and see the longitudinal scale, the greater timeline. Because when you give people the ability to have money in their hands, people like you, people like me, we spend it. We spend it almost right away. And you have to think of the economy like a human body. You have the different parts that all do different things, and what flows through the body is what keeps everything alive. It keeps it going, and that is the blood. The money is the blood of an economy. And with that flowing through on the various different parts, now, do certain parts need more blood than other parts? Sure. Do certain parts need blood at certain times more than others? Your hand is right in front of us. Oh wait, yeah, people
yeah,
can't see what I'm saying.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. Two
So,
different cameras going on.
yeah. Right. I'm sorry. I forgot about
You're
that.
on this laptop. We got your sources on
That's
that
right.
laptop. So
Yeah.
if people
Right
are wondering
on,
why
right
we're
on.
staring at this, yeah, that's why.
Right on. Well, if you guys want to look at the other camera, I'll know where you guys are actually at. But
Yeah,
that's
you
okay.
should be just staring at
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, what is to the left of them right now?
There's a clown
But,
over there. So
yeah. But so it's super
yeah.
important to keep in mind that we keep money flowing through an economy. So if we let it collect in one space or in one area for far too long, you start to get blood clots, you start to get swollen blood vessels, you start to get wounds where the blood is gushing out. And when you neglect other parts of your body, when you neglect other parts of your economy, it starts to rot, it starts to die, it starts to go into atrophy. And with that, when that happens, and then the other parts of the economy are just like, well, why aren't you picking yourself up by the bootstraps? Motherfucker, there's no boots, there's no straps, I don't even have socks, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, me being able to do anything. So what we need to do is make sure that not all the money is concentrating in one area.
And this is similar to what happened in the early 20s, 1920s and 30s. We had an increase in unions. We had the Great Depression that had happened in the late 1920s, and so there obviously there's huge influx. And of course, FDR was kind of forced to enact the New Deal and all that because there's only so much that capitalism can necessarily do.
That's
but
right.
I think under a certain amount of pressure, it doesn't have a choice. So, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that you said there. I think on the other side of that coin, they will try to escape doing that by all means. So I think this could be a way of reinvigorating the economy, giving workers more instead of to spend more and all that, more consumer products bought and all that, all that stuff. But that's something that capitalism is forced to do, not necessarily something that really can do
By
at an
design,
extensive
it's not
amount of
supposed to
time.
do that.
So, I mean, I would say it's like as a Marxist analysis of that, it's like, well, that is true. And I agree with everything that you said. But I think at the same time, they will, as soon as, we have enough money, if they were forced to do that, like we're going to just setting things on fire, like we're going to join unions and we're going to have a revolution. They're like, okay. You get Bernie Sanders in there or maybe even Warren, I don't know. It's like, well, do this, or, this is it for you. You're forced, so you're handed over, do that redistribution.
Well, that's exactly what FDR had to deal with.
Exactly. How the communists, the socialists, the trade unions got together. And so I think that probably could happen again. So it'd be a repeat of history, but we need to learn from that history because we had Thatcher and Reagan, and we had the new Democrats happened. So, I think getting money out of politics, I agree with that. On my side, I believe that we need to go further than that. And and this is why I like your platform. And I'd like to get to your policies, but you have a particular policy that I was rather impressed with. You have a worker co-op policy.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah. And you have describe Democracy at Work, Richard D. Wolff, Professor Richard Wolff, inspiration
That's
from
right.
there. I think this is what we need. If we're going to go farther with this economy, we're going to make sure if we're going to move in a more, a democratic system like within our economy, not just the political system, because you need it in the economy if anything is going to get done, because otherwise it's just going to be a reverse right over again. And I think that's something a lot of liberals are missing, is they need to go back in history and look, the workers did this. We had to.
Yeah.
We didn't have a choice. So they'll just reverse it because they own the economy. The capitalists own the economy. So we need to have more ownership of that economy if we're going to get anything done at all. So I'd like you to, if you can first explain a little bit about your worker co-ops idea. But how do you plan on introducing that, and what does it all spell?
So worker co-ops is a concept, and if you listen to Professor Richard Wolff at all, the idea of a worker co-op is as old as human beings, because the idea of a co-op or cooperative is that two or more people get together for a mutual outcome, a mutual shared outcome. Not necessarily, or not always, that it's this socialistic utopia of everyone has the exact same thing, but rather you both know that you need an outcome to reach, so you work together because, sorry, I'm right next to a road, but you work together because doing it solo would either take you longer or make it an impossible task. So the idea of the cooperative is pretty basic and standard and simple as long as you understand what it means to cooperate with others. But what I hope to do is to empower worker co-ops, because when we think of most of our businesses, companies, organizations, they look just like this, a triangle, right? You have one person at the top or a couple of people, a small group of people, they decide what to produce, where to produce, how to produce, what to do with the profits. And everyone in the bottom part has to deal with the consequences of those decisions. And Professor Richard Wolff does a fantastic job of outlining this and describing it. And if you're a fucking trucker who's sitting there saying, I don't have time to listen to Richard Wolff, fuck you. Yes, you can. You can turn on his fucking shows and do it. Just listen. And more importantly, as a trucker, I'm a solo driver, you have time to listen. Just put it on. So anyways, so he talks about the what to produce, where to produce, how to produce, what to do with the profits. Now, what ends up happening in a worker co-op is that. So instead of one person at the top or only a couple of people at the top making those decisions, it is a democratically decided organization. Which, if you are anybody who sits there and pounds your chest or tries to say America and freedom and democracy, well, then you need to not just live it outside of work. Why aren't we living it in work? Because we exist in a time where it is, I would argue, the third form of slavery. Original slavery, you have the master and you have the slaves. Feudalism, you have the lord and you have the serfs. Capitalism, you have the business owner and you have the workers, but the outcome always seems to come out the exact same way. It always comes out the exact same way. The person at the top gets everything and he lets you argue over the scraps, and that's what we're doing right now. Now, you ask, how do I plan on implementing this? And it's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. And I am going to completely admit that I'm a plagiarist when it comes to this, because it is not my original idea. When I had first heard about this, I was blown away. Jeremy Corbyn, do you know who that is?
Oh yeah, Jeremy Corbyn, the UK Labour Party, and I think you're going to go up to the right to refusal, correct?
But yeah, we're getting right down that path.
Okay, because I want you to break that down if you can. But yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So what I want to do from the very first day that I get into office, and I will fight for this whether I'm in office or not, I will fight for this until I'm either dead with my head on a pike, because I will piss off the corporatists on this, there's no question about it, or I just die of natural causes. I'm going to fight for this because it's the right thing to do, and that is, from day one, I will fight for legislation that specifically states if a company wants to shut down, if it wants to sell itself, if it wants to get publicly traded on the stock market, or it wants to move jobs overseas, it must give first right of refusal for the employees to purchase the company from them. This allows the employees to take over ownership. Now, if the employees can't afford, because buying a corporation is expensive, that's fine. The U.S. government will provide a loan at 0.25% interest. It should not be in the government's best interest to make money off of its citizens, rather to provide the means for them to contribute back into the economy. Because when that company survives, when that company stays, and it has the employees running it, they're still paying the local taxes, they're still paying the state taxes, they're still paying the federal taxes. All these corporations that up and ran the hell out of Camden, New Jersey, look at that place. Look at how much it has been destroyed. Christopher Hedges goes into deep detail on this, about how it is a wasteland. It is almost a war zone in Camden, New Jersey, because all the companies there are just like, no, we can get cheaper labor elsewhere, so we're going to leave. Who did that cheaper labor benefit? The people at the top. That's it. So by passing this legislation, it holds the company's feet to the fire. And if the company does not give that first right of refusal, in the legislation, it will say you are never allowed to sell your products in the United States again.
Yeah. In the top-down structure, that the way you explain that, a lot of people in America don't understand that. system. And also you describe on there Mondragon Corporation. I think that's a prime example
Oh yeah.
that Richard Wolff talks about, and I think it's worth exploring. He actually has a whole video on YouTube explaining Mondragon.
Yep.
But that's in many cooperatives are structured differently. So there are some bakeries where it's just completely horizontal, one person, one vote, and then you have those where like more, I guess you could call it representative. I mean, I can't even explain like how to break that down, but you still have a CEO, but that CEO like makes like what is it? Maybe instead of 300 times more than the worker, maybe
10.
maybe less,
In the
probably.
in
Yeah.
the Mondragon corporation's tenants for all of their companies below them, because Mondragon is not just one company. Mondragon is a conglomerate of multiple companies with over 100,000 employees. Every single business follows the same model. The highest paid employee cannot, under any circumstances, make any more than 8 times the lowest paid worker. Period. No
Yeah.
question about it. And what that does is it stems wealth inequality. Because when I do talk to some right wingers about this, because they do get on board, and then I tell them about this, like, wait a second, what if I'm working harder? You do make more, but you don't make it so bad where apartments or homes where you try to rent something, they put the rent prices so high up because they assume people can afford these places, when you know that your window is this and not this, in order to get people to pay whatever prices you're asking for. It makes this much more attainable. So you know that the people at the high end, their pockets are deeper, but they're not so deep that other people cannot function within that society. So when I go to larger cities and I have to get a one-bedroom place by myself, I'm looking at $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 for a one-bedroom apartment. But it's because they're under the assumption that you can afford those kind of prices. But that also carries over into foreign investments in our country, which are also falsely inflating those prices as well. But that's a completely different subject. So,
Yeah. I've been stressing the importance of worker cooperatives because, again, I kind of going back to that as we still have to worry about going back and repeating history again. And I
yep.
think that's kind of puts a nail in that coffin, in my opinion. So, I think, a lot of, especially in this country, a lot of people just don't understand that. And when you do, a lot of conservatives I've talked to, they actually like the idea of worker cooperatives. You just don't call it socialism. Just keep the isms out, and they like it. So that's I think if the rhetoric is correct and executed the right way, I think you can make something out of that. We'd like to get through some of your other policies here, because I know one really important one that a lot of voters are interested in is Medicare for all, and you have people like fucking Buttigieg, Pete, Mayor Pete, and he's like, well, Medicare for all, but only if you want it, But the way it's described, the way that really
no
is,
half measures.
yeah,
No
hey,
half measures on that.
we will just defund the fuck out of it and make it crap, and then everybody, oh, well, that's right. See, doesn't work.
Well,
So you need to get rid of that.
It goes further than that.
You need to get rid of the private insurance. You have to. So the people like that, no. But yeah, Medicare for all, single payer. If you're not for that, you're not for Medicare for all. So that's Go ahead and explain what your policies on it.
So off of what you just said towards the end there, that they will set it up to where the Medicare for all will fail if you have the two options, and that's exactly the problem, because in something like Pete Buttigieg's policy, and people like, I believe, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, even Elizabeth Warren, because she's not pinned down on the Medicare for all issue, and definitely Joe Biden, they're talking about, we want to give you a choice. And that right there is the illusion. That is That's the shiny keys. That's the shiny keys, and you have to be careful of that because they want you to get this impression that they are allowing you to make this decision. Now, this is what happens when you have a Medicare for All system and a private insurance option at the same time. The Medicare for All will accept anybody and everybody, as well as an insurance company should, because what is the purpose of insurance? It's for everyone to chip in, because when shit goes down, you want to be protected. Everyone chips in, you get sick, you get covered. You continue to chip in, someone else gets sick, they get covered. Most people understand the basic tenets of insurance, but what will end up happening with these two choices? The Medicare for All will take everybody. The private insurance companies, they're only going to take the young, the healthy, the people with no pre-existing conditions, and they're going to drop their prices. They're going to make their prices plummet because if everyone is healthy, what are they spending their money on? Nothing, right? So they're just like, well, the insurance is only $10 a month. Why? Because they don't have to spend the money anywhere else, right? So all of these healthy people are going to go to that. Now, Medicare for All is going to get slammed with all the unhealthy people. And now you're placing an undue burden on just one system. These people over here who are healthy are not contributing into it. And the private insurance companies who are only in it for the fucking money, that is the thing you have to keep in mind. They're only in it for the money. They are overglorified bookkeepers. But those people on that side, they're going to go, well, look, Medicare for All doesn't work. You should stay with us. And then when they get those people out of the Medicare for All, the government system is going to collapse. It will be an inevitable outcome. It's going to happen. And so going back to the drive or the motive of these insurance companies is also super important. I worked for 6 months with my cousin who owns, he's an ophthalmological surgeon. He's an eye surgeon in California. And I actually got to listen. Well, it's not so much listen, but see some of the interactions that occur between the insurance companies and the doctor's office. And it basically boils down to this. The literature says they're covered. No, it doesn't. The literature says that they're covered. No, it doesn't. The literature says that they're covered. No, it doesn't. And it goes back and forth. The insurance company is looking for every single reason to tell you no, and you cannot sit there and tell me that you haven't experienced that. If you've been alive for more than 20 years, your family or you personally have definitely experienced the insurance company going, we're not going to cover it.
Cuba has better healthcare outcomes than we do. They're under a fucking embargo. I don't think a lot of people understand this. They have their cancer treatment. People are, trying to flee to Cuba over, on rafts and shit, so they can, get cancer treatment. That's a fact. People are going over the border. There are more people going into Mexico for, what is it, dental? I mean, for fuck's sake.
Oh yeah. Well,
I mean,
I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and I have friends that did exactly that.
That's a thing, and you get these, fucking like conservatives. Oh, got these Canadians running over the border. Like, what the fuck are you thinking? Like herds, like Lord of the Rings style of Canadians fucking crossing over.
Patently false.
Like, it's
Patently
incredible.
False.
So yeah, I mean, just the basic fact. I mean, when they say, well, there's no way that like a universal healthcare system would work, I just say, yeah, Cuba. That's it.
Yeah,
that's
of
all
all
you got.
places, Cuba. Wow.
I didn't even have to say
100%.
Scandinavia. I don't even have to say that. Like, it just Cuba. They're under an embargo. They have better healthcare than we do. So explain, and they can't. They can't explain that. Right. They're just, it's fake news. It's fake news. Like, well, according to UN stats, not really. So, but yeah, that's really, really important. Let's go through some other policies here.
Let's go to your climate change.
Yeah, there you go. Climate change. That I think there's a rhetoric behind this that needs to be understood because when with climate change they'll say, oh well, it's just the planet's cooling, and they'll grab a snowball and be like, see, and it's like people need to understand that temperature is not the same thing as climate. And so
that's exactly right.
Being able to demonstrate this to people who don't understand the importance of this, that we're seeing climate change happening now. You got droughts. You have these massive Category 5 hurricanes and all over the place. I mean, it's
the floods throughout the Midwest should be enough alone for the truckers.
Absolutely. I mean, all these different.
I was out in South Dakota, North Dakota around March. I saw all the fields flooded. All of them. All of them. I-29 when that was shut down out there by Kansas City.
Yeah.
Horrible. Horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I've been back there recently, and like throughout the summer, and I was the main thing I was looking at was the corn and the beans fields. Like, you know, like that's a huge impact. You know, the water is taking up all them fields. Holy crap.
and that directly impacts us as truckers no matter how you slice it. I don't care if you're hauling electronics or if you're hauling cattle. The impact upon the farmers alone can absolutely destroy our industry, because all of a sudden all those truckers are out of work, because moving agriculture is a massive industry, and if they're out of work, guess where they're going to go? To any other part that they can. So now if you're worried about your job, it's going to be a domino effect unlike anything you've ever seen. If you don't give a fuck about climate change, you have a fucking problem. You have a severe issue of denial that needs to be addressed immediately.
Yeah, I actually used to have that problem.
Yeah, why don't you go explain?
Yeah.
You have to hear this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I used to be a really huge Trump supporter and all that. And
Wow, okay.
I had a fixed mind. It's what I had. Okay. I didn't want to believe in climate change or global warming, whatever they called it. I didn't think it was going to happen. I just figured that, you know, it's the weather. If you look back in history, you know, it just goes in a system. That's what I thought. You know, hey, it's going to happen again. Okay, we're going to get really hot. We're going to get really cold. You know, it happens every year, but I don't know. The older I've gotten, the better, the more I've been out and around, the more I see stuff, the more I became more aware. And now, like, just recently within this year, I've realized, you know, this is happening. You can't stop it, like, suddenly. You can't stop it suddenly. You can go ahead.
You know what it is? It's all of us sitting in the pool, and one of us looks over and says, "Is it getting warmer?" We are the frogs in the boiling pot. We don't realize it. Most of us may not realize it until it's too late. The unfortunate thing is there's no way for us to get out of the pot. Right. There is no planet B. There is no second chance. There is no reset button. There is no way out of this problem. We have to confront it head on. And I can't tell you how many right-wingers I run into, and they're just like, you need to take some responsibility. You need to fucking listen to yourself then. You need to start listening to your own goddamn words. Take some goddamn, not only self-responsibility, responsibility to the society and the planet that you live on, because what was it? Ever since 2009 or something, every single year has been a record year for heat.
Wow.
Every single year. You have to be, what am I looking for? Willfully ignorant. You have to be proactively ignorant, to ignore what is going on, to say, hey, you know, oh, no, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The truth doesn't care about your fucking feelings.
Okay. So you do support the Green New Deal.
100%.
So can you kind of break down, because I mean, and I know people like Elizabeth Warren, she's really wonky about it. I don't know if who knows what she's going to do. Apparently she's not taking money in the general. She's not doing unilateral
we'll see if it puts in action.
When she's going to take money in the general, who knows? Anyway, so like Green New Deal, you know, you don't want to be a technocrat about it. You have to explain these things briefly and at least like, you know, in the most important details as possible. So do you know how like you would describe the Green New Deal to somebody who has no idea what that is?
Yeah, so for me, the way that I try to explain it is I try to bring it down to a level that just hits the highlights, because when a person hears the highlights, I tend to see a change in them. When you start to go into the details, now they're trying to find the excuses to say no, the excuses to say why it's wrong. So the basic tenets are this. You know FDR, right? FDR had the New Deal. FDR created a bunch of jobs for America that saved our goddamn country that was falling apart. Our planet is on fire. If you notice the weather changing, we have to do something about it. And the only way that we do something about it right now, it's not getting paper straws. It's not just getting a reusable bag for the grocery store. We have to do something about our fossil fuel use, because that by itself is on such a scale. They impact the planet in a way that you could never use enough straws for that to make any difference. On top of which, those straws are made by the same oil that also goes into your vehicle.
Yeah, and I can totally agree with you on that, because I used to be a pipe fitter in construction part of the time when I was out of the truck, and I worked in the refineries. I did industrial work, so I've been inside those plants, and I mean, there's just so much chemicals that run through there, and they're highly dangerous and all that. And what they do is they burn off the chemicals to make the stuff. I even worked at Phillips 66, the oil refinery. I helped them with that. And I mean, I see all the smoke all the time come up and out, come up and out. Like it burns constantly, nonstop. They never shut down. What they do is they shut down part of their plant. They never shut down the whole thing. It never gets shut down. They only shut down a part of it, and what we had was like a month to get it back up and running, because they were losing money due to that.
Yeah, and when you talk about the smoke that's coming out of these factories, when we look up at the sky, we see this enormous thing that is an unimaginable depth. It seems to go on forever, right? But if you were to look at it, and I think it was either Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye, one of those guys had said something along those lines, or what I'm about to say next. But when they described the atmosphere, we think of it as this massive thing. But if you look at it from the scale of the entire planet, it's about as thick as a couple of sheets of cellophane around the surface of the earth. We don't really understand how small, how thin, how much we can easily impact our atmosphere by tossing these chemicals into the air. We don't have a whole lot of atmosphere to work with. So when these corporations, these companies are just like, it's just one little thing. I remember when I was a little kid back in the 80s, they were doing the anti-pollution campaign, and they would have these commercials where it's just like, it's just one little piece of trash. It's just one little this, it's one little that. When these corporations say that, it's not one little whatever. It's one gigantic, it's basically, it's going to the pilot or the TA and walking into the bathroom and somebody didn't flush. Holy fucking God, what just happened in here?
Yeah, and it's a global phenomenon. I mean, it's not just the United States. So, I mean,
That's
like,
exactly
it's something that, I mean, is the United States being, like, the sole, almost, I mean, China's catching up. But, I mean, speaking of China,
China's
like,
going to beat us.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're being forced in a way to do these alternative technologies because, they import their oil. So in order to circumvent that, the Chinese government is bringing, they're largest, exporter of solar panels. And they're really accelerating the need to have more electric cars and all that. And a lot of that has to do more with more economics than it does, just being, caring about the planet. 'Cause, I mean, there's still like a capitalist sort of apparatus that exists in China. If you want to call it socialist, that's fine. But there still are these capitalists that are in China, and they have a means to make profit, even if the Chinese government puts a cap on that necessarily. So there's still something like that there. And there's this global phenomenon that's happening. And so in a way, a lot of these politicians are trying to figure out how can we make solving climate change profitable. And that's a problem with capitalism, which is why they're like, oh, well, we'll get to it in 100 years or 50 years or some shit. Like, we got to do that. We have like, what, 10 years? That's a very conservative estimate. So,
if they were to think outside the box, the Green New Deal is profitable. That's the problem. They are only looking at it as how do we get money into our pockets right now, as opposed to how much money are we going to save by doing something about this now.
If
I
China,
think they
sure,
what they say we would save $50 trillion. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was some exorbitant amount of money that we would save by enacting the Green New Deal because of all the other costs we would
yeah.
mitigate.
Yeah, and if the Chinese, economy is growing, and they're growing, 6%, and we're growing at 2%. I mean, they're going to surpass us by, by the latest 2030. So
Oh yeah.
if the United States intends on catching up globally, we need to obviously invest into technology. We need to invest in more education.
Oh yeah.
There's so much we're not doing because these things are just not profitable. What's happening to the first world now is what happened when the imperialism was happening during Vietnam, and happened during the Reagan era and the Clinton era, and it's happening here now. So
Yep.
in a way, this needs to be figured out as a society. This isn't going to happen if we just let profits control our governmental system.
And,
It can't
and that
happen.
right there, I think, is the overarching theme and issue we have in this country more than anything else is greed. It's
Yes.
unadulterated greed. We praise greed in this country. When I was growing up, how much are you going to make? How well are you going to do for yourself? What new things are you going to buy? What kind of size, what size of house do you want? And a great example of this is one of the jobs that I worked was door-to-door sales, business-to-business sales, selling this stuff called, it was a shop online kind of company called Quill. But the guy who owned the company, he sits me down for the interview and he says, look, I want to ask you, what are you going to do when you make your first $1 million? And I looked at him like, okay, whatever, dude. Like when I make my first $1 million, and he was being serious. And I was just like, I don't know. I'd probably just get, I'd buy a home. I'd buy a newer version of my car, and that would really be about it, and invest whatever I had left. And he's just like, okay, so tell me about your dream home. And I was like, okay, a tiny home in the middle of the Arizona desert, and everyone leaves me the fuck alone.
Yep.
And he's like, what the hell's a tiny home? And I was like, it's a tiny home, like maybe 800, 900 square feet. And he's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, you can get a mansion. I'm like, I don't want a mansion. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, a tiny home. Why the hell do I need something excessive? Why do I need something big? I don't even need the $1 million, honestly. I just need enough to just be happy and content and fine.
Yeah,
and I
why
think
do
the
you need,
vast
like,
majority of
200
America
rooms?
feels that way. What's that?
I said, why do you need like 200 rooms?
Or 5 mansions.
Yeah.
Like what?
Exactly.
Why
Or
do you
10
need all
yachts
this?
like Betsy the
Why
Boss.
do you need all this? It's like take it back to simplicity. If you take things down to simplicity, you really don't need that much. I mean, you can look around my house.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing with capitalism is overabundance. That's something
Yeah.
Marx talked about. And with with the climate change, and we're still on this, is that a lot of these politicians, a lot of these corporate politicians, they say, and you heard this at like the climate town hall. They're like, oh, well, just you have plastic straws, and you could do tiny homes. It's the people, the workers. We have to reduce our lives down, while these corporations continue to keep doing what they're doing, and so they try to put the burden on the workers, the working class, rather than
That's
it's
right.
actually the ruling class. You have 100 companies that are contributing the most to climate change, and that's something they will never want to discuss, and that's something we have to force them. I think you have a lot of other interesting policies. I'd really like to hear thoughts on. You have the what is your take on education reform? Because obviously
Oh,
that
God.
needs to be solved. That really needs to be. So we're terrible ranked on ranked
Mm.
as far as like globally. We're down there. So
Yeah, we are.
how do you intend on taking us up here?
So when it comes to like grade school and high schools, I am not going to sit here and try to say I'm some type of knowledgeable person in that aspect. However, I think standardizing testing is total bullshit. And for anyone who is immediately sitting there going like, "What the hell, man? You're just a truck driver. What do you know about education?" I was a fucking university educator for a decade. Don't sit there and tell me I don't know anything about education. I have a master's degree in linguistics. My specialization was working with the international community, and I've taught a myriad of different subjects in lieu of that. So when it comes to education, especially at the collegiate level, I can only see one argument, and that's for graduate school, why we need to charge anybody, but I still disagree with that. I still think that it should be something that a person, if they're willing to attain it, we should provide them with the means to do so. Because right now, any one of us could go to Germany and go get not just an undergraduate, but a graduate degree from Germany and pay absolutely nothing other than our housing and our food. That's all you have to pay. Now, what happens here in the United States is it has become a fucking business. Just like healthcare, it is a business. It shouldn't be a business. Anything that is for the benefit of people to live a better life, which then in turn impacts everyone, it impacts everyone around them, we should be assisting people to make sure that happens. Now, if it's a personal gain of I don't know, like a car or a house. Well, housing is also another issue, but like a car, whatever, that's something completely different. But when somebody gets educated, they become a tax-paying citizen. And if they get a better education, they make more money, which thus, in turn, pays into the economy. But the solution for this came from a pretty smart motherfucker named Bernie fucking Sanders, who said, yes, I am going to put a tax to help pay for the education. Now, a lot of people immediately freak out, and sometimes Bernie's not the greatest at approach when he has his ideas, but when you actually read his ideas, they are stunning, they're amazing, they're wonderful, because if you're listening to this podcast right now, or if you're listening to or watching this video live, if you are not trading on the stock market, Bernie's plan does not affect you. He can raise $2.6 trillion with a T, trillion dollars, and pay off all the current student loan debt and fund education for future students by placing a tax on trade speculation. And there's another tax that he'll place, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but the one tax is 0.05%, not 1%, not a tenth of a percent, a half of a tenth of a percent. And he has the plan in place that will raise that money. Then there's also a 0.02% tax. Those two taxes are what will raise the money, the $2.6 trillion, that will get millions of Americans out of debt, out of student loan debt. And that in turn goes back to the entire thing about the blood in the economy, the blood in the body. When you get that money back into the system, because for myself, why did I get into trucking? Because I couldn't afford my fucking student loans. I still can't afford them, and I'm a trucker. But I will not throw money into a money pit, which is exactly what the student loans become. My payments per month are $1,200 fucking dollars. $1,200. $500 or $600%, or $500 or $600 of that is just the interest. And they're talking to me like, well, we can get you on a repayment plan that only has you paying $400. And I'm like, wait a second, I pay $400, but the debt still grows by $100 each month or $200 each month? Well, yes, but you're also paying off your interest.
Yeah, they can't afford that. Over time, that's just going to, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's always, to me, it's pretty much just a big scam. That's what it is. And they're like, hey, we can help you. We will give you this much money, and you can pay off all your stuff. But then you got to pay us back. So it's like, what's the point? I'm paying this, and you want me to pay this for a less amount, but I have to pay you longer and more, or in a shorter time period, but you're still getting more money than what I originally had on my first loan.
And a really powerful point I want to make off of this right now is pretty simple. You remember when I talked about how capitalism is just the third form of slavery?
Yes.
Where you have the slave master and the slave, the lord and the serf, and then the business owner and the worker. It's not just the business owner and the worker. I would argue It's the debt holder and the debtee, or the person who owes the debt. That's the system that we're in. College education, like I said, it's become nothing but a big business scam. And what it has turned into is, I'm going to own you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and a lot of Christians support this. Republicans, they uphold this, and if you read, for those who have read the Bible, and I have, that talks about usury. What is usury?
Yes.
It is when you give somebody some amount of value, whatever it is, gold coins or copper pieces or whatever, and then you ask for more in return from what you gave. That's what aloneism. That's what we have embraced in this country. What it's supposed to be, right? A Christian country, but it is supporting some of the worst forms of sin within that faith. You wonder why Jesus came in and overturned those tables in the temple. They were money changing. Think about what's happened in the stock market, what's happening, in our banking system. Like, how can you be a Christian and support this shit? Because this is what you have to be like, in denial about this. So that, just the banking system alone is one form of capitalism, that's a financial capitalism. Of course, you have industrial capitalism, have the corporations, etc. But I'm just saying, like, if you want to be consistent in your faith, it would just make sense to go, oh, that's right. That's why Jesus was flipping over all those tables,
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I was raised in a Roman Catholic education system, an archdiocese, St. Aloysius in Bowling Green, Ohio. I went to St. John's Jesuit in Toledo, Ohio, and I was raised around this. And I'm unafraid to tell people that I am a secularist. I am an atheist, and that I was raised with all this being told to me, force-fed to me. But here's the important thing to take away from what I just said, and that is, when I was in the second grade, I was like, I want to be a deacon. And the priest was like, are you serious? And I'm just like, yes, of course. It seems like a wonderful thing, because all the stuff that you're telling me, it sounds so true. It sounds so accurate. And then I started to read the Bible. It took me a year as a kid, in the third and fourth grade. It took me a year to get through all of it. And I immediately started having questions.
Do you believe in the talking donkey? Yeah.
I have seen Shrek 1 and 2.
It's Shrek, and is in there somewhere, I think. That's the Bible's filled with contradictions and whatnot. If you want to be Christian,
it's not just the contradictions of the Bible.
Just don't force your beliefs.
It's the contradictions of the people. They want to cherry pick the parts that agree with their ideology.
Yeah. Oh, that is that's really true. That's really true. So I also grew up being Christian. I was Methodist, and my church had like this puppet group, and we went around and did performances, and so I got to experience not only Methodist but Catholic, Lutheran, Baptist, Mennonite. I got
Wow.
Apostle Assembly of God, like just a whole bunch of them. We would go on their church Sundays, and it would just, everyone had a different view. It was the same stuff, but people had a different view on how they perceived it. Mm-hmm. And, that makes you question which one's right.
Yep.
This kind of gets into another different subject, because you mentioned individual rights, and especially you talk about women's rights, and that's something a lot of the religious fundamentalists, they want to deconstruct the separation of church and state, and just interpret it in a way that absolutely makes no sense. So, as far as like women's rights, how are you going to approach that?
It's a tough subject. There's no question about it. And in particular with Northwest Ohio, it could definitely be a campaign killer, because there are a lot of people in Northwest Ohio. I'm sorry, I'm watching somebody do the Naruto run to Taco Bell over here. I'm sorry, it's a Subway, but yeah, it was funny. So anyways, where were we? We were talking about life.
That was distracting.
Life choices, the individual choices. Yeah, it was. It was like Okay, are you going to go storm Area 51? Good luck. It didn't work out the first time.
Storm Taco
So
Bell.
that's right.
Fajita.
That's right. Make a run for the border. But when it comes to an individual's rights, like I said, it's really difficult in Northwest Ohio. But as much as they are unwavering on that, I am unwavering on being pro-choice, because as one of my Republican Trump-loving friends said, this is her words. I don't. She at first she prefaced it with, I don't think anybody wants to be in the position of having an abortion. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And she says, and this is where I'm torn, because she's like, I wouldn't get an abortion, but I wouldn't also be in that situation. And more importantly, she said, I don't think there's a single person alive who is intentionally getting pregnant just to have an abortion. No one's doing that. No woman's going around just being like, hey, you busy? Why don't you come help me out? I want to go get an abortion. Like, no woman does that.
Yeah.
And more important, I'm sorry to couple off of that. Oh damn it! What was the point I was going to make? It'll come back to me. But anyways, you were going to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's the conservatives talk about, the Democrats, and they're trying to implement Sharia law and all that, or you can call it Shakira law, and they don't know the difference.
But they're doing it with this anyways.
Hey, just the hips don't lie. I had to say that. I mean, they're going more in the direction like that. Hey, I mean, look at Saudi Arabia when they behead women for getting, sexually assaulted. I mean, there are real problems with this, because this is where these the Republicans are trying to go now, where if they try to get an abortion, then that's a federal crime, and that's a real problem right now. So it's are they really no woman is just, I'm just gonna have a kid and just promiscuously going around and having sex with all these people. That's just not realistic at all. Absolutely not realistic.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go through that at all. I mean, when you have a kid, that's your kid. That's your blood. When most women, you can ask women for this. When you have a kid, you want that to be yours. So it's just a complete myth. That.
And the other point I wanted to make was this: for all the guys out there listening, every single one of you, and if you are pro-life, there is one thing right now that you can do. You can fix this problem with people getting abortions, and it's really simple. You can make this problem stop right now, so you never have to face that choice. Get a fucking vasectomy. Go get your shit clipped, because guess what? It's reversible, and all of a sudden, you are not going to be responsible for that situation or that difficult choice. And you have just taken the steps in the right direction to ensure that an abortion doesn't have to occur. So if you're some guy sitting there pounding your chest saying a woman should never have an abortion, then you should go get a vasectomy and stop the problem before it ever happens.
Yeah, I've actually never thought about it like that. So, I mean, you bring up a really good, interesting point. I never thought about that. Other thing on the abortion too, I believe it is fully a woman's right to decide, because she is carrying it. All we did was help make it. That was it. She is carrying it. So I don't think if they do get an abortion, they should be punished at all, because it's their choice. And
that's right.
Most of the people who are getting abortions, it may be from rape or something else like that, And do you really want that child? No, you really don't.
No. And nobody wants to be put into that situation. But then they sit there and they deface, defame, they belittle, they attack these women for having to make a choice that I guarantee you none of these people, guys or gals or women or men or whatever, they would not want to have to be in that position. But I guarantee you, it's not, well, actually, I don't even have to guarantee you, there are more than enough right-wingers who have probably been in that situation where it was life or death. And guess what? They probably chose their life.
Yeah, so policy-wise, I mean, that would include supporting Planned Parenthood, more funding for Planned Parenthood, more
But Planned
funding.
Parenthood doesn't just do abortions. I
No,
mean,
they don't.
the
Which
extent
means,
that they go to,
yeah, and well, that's
they,
another thing that a lot of Republicans do. They say, "Oh, we don't, abortions, whatnot," but they also limit contraception as well. That's just a
that's
big
right.
thing that Planned Parenthood does, and teaching couples know how to raise a child. They do that stuff. So, I mean, just decoupling that I mean, that just makes the system worse. Pretty much what this is the same thing that a lot of Republicans are doing to Medicare, Social Security. It's just a way of taking those funds in order to distribute it to the those in the ruling class. So yeah, I mean, having like a bunch of men on the board making decisions for women, absolutely.
Yeah,
So there obviously there needs to be more women who make these decisions.
Yes.
And
yeah.
being able to support, means of, counseling and contraceptions and these different things that help in that process. So at least you can avoid a situation like that. And we have a number of different issues as well
Hmm.
that we wanted to talk about. You're going through here. Get money out of politics. That's something that's
Oh my God,
brand
yes.
new. That a lot that we've never. I mean, this country has not discussed. I mean, so at least is the best thing that capitalism can offer is probably this. So. Yeah, what is your opinion on money and getting money out of politics? And I know you support Wolfpack as well. So
Oh
shoot.
yeah, I'm 100% on board with Wolfpack. Although I do have to separate myself from them because I'm running for office because of their charter. But yeah, getting God, why is this even being discussed? That we have to sit there and argue that money is not speech. It's absurd. This Buckley v. Vallejo decision was, and by the way, everyone immediately goes to Citizens United. Citizens United was an aftermath. Citizens United was the third step, and I can't remember the second step, but Buckley v. Vallejo is the most important decision that was made that allowed money to be speech. That is quite literally what it is. If you get time, definitely pull up Buckley v. Vallejo and understand that that was the pivotal moment when the corporations were finally able to sit there and go, thank you. I can finally throw as much money at as a politician as I want with no consequences and all the benefits.
Of course.
So getting money out of politics is not just a platitude to throw at people. It is something that is we need to fundamentally not change, fix our system. Because right now, if you are not in the multi-millionaire, if not billionaire class, I don't care how much money you throw at a politician, your opinion doesn't matter to them. When the Koch brothers can spend $2, $3, $4, $500 million on an election, and to them that's just chump change. They just throw that out there, and their profits that they make off of those politicians that they bought, that $200 million, $300 million investment was worth it because they're going to make $2, $3, $4, $5 billion off of that initial investment. And what they're investing in are the votes that matter on Capitol Hill. In a representative democracy, unfortunately, the only votes that ultimately matter are those people who are the representatives. So if those people are bought off, it doesn't matter how the public feels. It doesn't matter that 93% of the American public wants gun reform right now. That is not a partisan issue. 93% of the country wants it right now. 70% of people want Bernie's Medicare for all. That is not a partisan issue. When we look at these things as what they truly are and how the American public feels, we're not as polarized as the politicians would have you think. Rather, we have to look at the true enemy. And when I talk to the Democrats right now, because I'm in the primaries, I do have a primary opponent. When I talk to them, I say, look, you cannot disenfranchise, you cannot ostracize the right. We are in this together. It is not Republicans versus Democrats. It isn't the left versus the right. We are in a situation, it is the haves versus the have-nots. And if you don't think that you're a have, you are definitely a have-not.
And your primary opponent as well, because it's for the incumbent. Because I mean, you're going after incumbent, but you're also in the primary with another Democrat. Is that correct?
Technically, two. The
Okay.
one, I don't see him going too far. He doesn't even have a treasurer yet. He's a nice guy, but he's has no. Like I said, he's super nice. He's super smart. He has zero presence when it comes to speaking to a crowd. Zero presence.
And you do have that presence, by the way. So
I've been told.
yeah, absolutely. You got a radio voice as well too. So props on that. I think that'll really help. You know, you get a lot of these people, politicians, that just like, oh God, they're so fucking boring to listen to. Jesus Christ. You know, you're incumbent. Why are they so unappealing? You know, what about the
Bob
incumbent?
Latta?
Yes.
Bob Latta is okay. So, a perfect example of how people feel about Bob Latta happened 2 weeks ago at this parade in a town called Perrysburg, Ohio, and they were having this thing called the Harrison Rally Days. And what they do is they have a parade go down the center, you know, the main street or whatever, and as the fire trucks and the police officers and all that were going by, everyone's like, yay, yay, okay, yay. And then Bob Latta comes up, and this is not hyperbole, silence the entire time. And then when he is finally gone and you see the marching bands and the rest of the people are, yay, yay. Like, the silence was deafening, but it was also telling. Nobody, not the Republicans and not the Democrats, nobody likes Bob Latta, but he keeps getting reelected because he rides the party ticket, he takes corporate donations left and right, and he is living off the legacy of his father. I can't remember his father's first name, and it's a very unique name. He was in office for 30 years, and his father was old school Republican, which, excuse me, was what my parents were. This is prior to Reagan, which was a very different Republican than what we're used to today. So the original Latta, who was in office, Latta, wasn't an awful person, and he was also very active. He actually did stuff. His son, Bob Latta, who has been in office now for 10 years, he is a professional check collector. That's it. He takes money from his donors, he collects his paycheck for being a representative, and then he pretty much just says, what's my agenda? When he is asked to go to events, he has sent his secretary, he has sent his staffers, and refuses to either go. He refuses to debate. He does not engage with the public because he knows nobody likes him. But because of his father's name, he keeps getting reelected. So my thought or my feeling on this, it isn't going to just take a Democrat to beat him. It's not just going to take a progressive. It's going to take an aggressive progressive. It's going to take an unapologetic progressive. It's going to take somebody who will get in his face, who will get in the faces of others and say, do you want this to change? Because if you do, you have to do something about it. But if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always gotten.
Yeah. It's going to take a loud, bald man who supports. I'm going to go through some additional policies here that you support. This is what this takes. You know, we've gone through your other policies. You also support a $15 minimum wage, salary increases for teachers, criminal justice reform, ending for-profit prisons. Awesome.
Oh, yes.
End illegal and regime change wars. That could go on.
Yes.
That could be a whole fucking podcast about that. Supporting unions and and ending the corruption in unions themselves.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Our unions are awful. So legalize marijuana. Absolutely. Supporting LGBTQ2. I'm sorry. LGBTQIA plus. And of course, restoring Glass-Steagall. Yeah, I know I fucked up the acronym, but yeah, the homosexual community and the trans community, etc., are very ignored, and it's very important that their voices get heard. Yes. So it's good that there is an outlet for them. I think overall, I mean, to win a campaign like this, it takes somebody who can at least explain these policies in a way where it's appealing instead of these technocrat boring monologues that absolutely just make me want to fall asleep. It's like
Yeah.
they're talking to themselves. So yeah, I think your voice is absolutely important. And
Thank you.
yeah, I'm actually kind of blown away, man.
You know, I like to think of myself as a product of education, because I've spent my entire life learning. When most of my friends were out partying and playing games and doing whatever, they're just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Watching the news. I'm reading a scholarly article. I'm um, exploring international affairs." And because I've actually been criticized, people have asked me, they're just like, "Oh, what makes you so special that you're just going to run for Congress? You never run for anything else in your life." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. One, I'm absolutely uncorrupted, and two, these are the policies that I know. These are the topics I understand." There's a major issue in my local area, and it has to do with the Maumee watershed. And when people were telling me about it, I was kind of going, I don't know what to think about that. And they're just like, "Well, what makes you think you run for national office?" Because that's not a national issue. There are people far more knowledgeable on that, and I concede to them. I would take their advice. What can I bring to Capitol Hill? But if I'm not knowledgeable on it, why the hell would I run for that office? So instead, I know where my strengths lie. I know where my interests lie. I'm an extremely cosmopolitan individual who's traveled the world and the nation, not just in a truck, but like actually gone out and seen all the different parts of the country. This is where I would best fit. So running for a smaller office, for me, that's something I do 5 years from now, 10 years from now. These politicians who start at these lower levels, what ends up happening is as they're moving their way up the chain, they get corrupted along the way. They see the fruit that they can get to that's a little higher, and they're willing to make sacrifices along the way. And I did this deal for that person. I helped out this person in this way. And now that all of a sudden I went from being a city council member to a U.S. congressman, I owe Joe Schmo a favor. I owe Jane Lane a favor. I owe whoever a favor. Stop voting for these goddamn politicians who have made it their fucking career.
Yeah, and that's what they do is when they take this money, they spend all this time in office begging for more money. That's why they're career politicians. So that's why they're not in Congress attending, because they're busy in their office on the phones calling up their donors. So that's what happened. You look at Joe Biden; he's off in his little world, and with these corporate executives and all of that, and it's a completely different world that he's living in, and especially the media doesn't do a good job. It's capitalist media. I don't expect them to do a good job, but I think it's completely different set of politics that's happening within the Democratic Party. And it's rather interesting to see how that dynamic is working out. It's historical. So as far as now, as a leftist take on this, of course, the way I see this is that capitalist society is not going to last.
Nope.
Just keeping the hands, the profits, and at least the economic forces, production under capitalists is not going to be sustainable. We see this in automation, which is why Andrew Yang is succeeding so well. Having an universal basic income. I mean, these things are just a manifestation of the problems of capitalism. And if you can talk about automation, having to have universal basic income, which I want your thoughts on, that should just spell out it's a contradiction. This is a goddamn contradiction. It's not sustainable. I mean, where this goes, who knows? It would be wrong for me or anybody to say they know. But this system that we have now is not going to last. So I think the conversation needs to extend from not just getting money out of politics, or not just corruption, all these, et cetera, but where can we take this next? And I think the next step, which is why I think Richard Wolff is so important, is talking about what happens in production. and
Yes.
deconstructing that. Honestly, I'm wearing a Karl Marx emoji shirt. I think we need to bring back Marxism, at least in its most basic. We need to analyze what's happening at the core of our economy and figure out how can we bring the working class into the conversation, because we're not. We're not. These
Yeah.
assholes run for office, and we're just like, yeah, well, whatever sect of the ruling class that we were forced to vote for, this can't. This is not fucking sustainable, man.
No,
So
it's
I
not.
do I
And when
do
it
want
comes
to.
to Carl,
Yeah,
oh,
go
go ahead. Sorry.
I do wanted to get your thoughts on what you think of universal basic income, and
Okay, yeah.
what you were going to say after. So
Actually, the universal basic income and automation is definitely a topic I was hoping we were going to discuss because, like I mentioned before, I worked directly with these vehicles. I sat in them, watched them work their magic, and these cars, just the cars alone, and the trucks are even better. You can hate me all you want about, how dare you work with the automation. Guess what? It's coming whether you like it or not. The
right,
semi truck came along whether the guys with the horse and buggy liked it or not. Times are going to change, and we have to be willing and capable of adapting to those changes when they come along. Now, if you think about it this way, if you look back to like the 1950s, 60s, 70s, roughly before trickle down economics and all that stuff, the way we looked at the future, and you can see it in cartoons like the Jetsons and different TV shows they had back then. We looked at society as improving in this direction where our jobs got easier, we worked less, but we still were able to live the life we grew accustomed to. You can have a home, you can have a family, your own car, your own robot dog, if you're talking about the Jetsons, right? But what ended up happening, the people at the top said, well, we could have our workers do a 20-hour work week for the same salary, or we could just put that money in our pockets instead.
yeah,
And that's the system that we're in. And that is exactly what Marx warned us about. And that's the other thing that I didn't know about Marx until I started listening to Richard Wolff. And that is, whenever I hear somebody say Marx was a socialist, I laugh and I laugh and I laugh. And I'm like, Marx wasn't a socialist. Marx was a capitalist. Marx wanted capitalism to work, but he saw the inherent flaws that would inevitably come from capitalism. And he started to say, we're going to have a problem.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, he was critiquing the utopianist as far as utopian socialism, and as far as like they believed that we were going to have some kind of different economy, and were trying to make predictions. And he said, no, that's where the concept of he wrote scientific socialism. Yeah, I mean, he's a socialist, but he was deconstructing capitalism. That's why he's known for capital.
Yeah, but
As
he
far
was
as,
raised in capitalism, so that's where I come with
yeah,
the whole. He
exactly.
was a capitalist.
Yeah, he. I don't say he was a capitalist, but he admired capitalism and how it was efficient in. It was efficient in raising, a society and bringing it up and industrializing. But of course, he did realize, wow, this is not bringing equality. It's not, it's only helping a certain class, and that's we made those distinctions of there's two different classes. We never escaped this. So
And I definitely
yeah,
concede to you on that. You definitely explained it a lot better than I
sure.
could.
But yeah, I think we need to go back to Marxism and deconstructing capitalism. That's where the left needs to go, because we've gotten
Yeah.
here. And if we're going to talk about democratic socialism, I mean, shit. Like Richard Wolff is a prime example. You want to call it market socialism, you can call it that. I mean, being able to have a democratic economy, which is why I disagree with Bernie Sanders. A lot of progressives, when they say, it's a pet peeve of mine when they call themselves democratic socialists, they're talking about they only describe capitalism, the effects of capitalism, but they don't really describe what they are. So I think if you are going to go in that direction of socialism, instead of just using it as a rebellious term to separate yourself from liberal, it needs to be described as, okay, I want to democratize the economy as best as I possibly can. I think without even any underlining, just saying that. Of course, you can use cooperatives. You can have more state investment or maybe state ownership. You can do that too. But I mean, that's basically what this is: more public access and ownership and say in how our economy works, aside from, people who are just trying to make money, and making sure our society is not based off of profit incentive, but based on where we want to go as a society. So as far as socialism, I would want to take DSA back to its roots, is before Bernie Sanders started coming as a socialist. I just bringing it back and say, okay, let's go back. Hold on a minute. Hold on. Let's go back to where we were.
What's important is to show people that we're not looking for the final answer. We're looking for the evolution of the answer.
Right.
So when people think, I know the ultimate solution now, and that's why you get these conservatives. And the true definition of the conservative is, I'm okay with what's going on right now, and I don't want it to change. But we cannot have that mindset and have technology at the same time, constantly changing, constantly evolving. Because, and I do want to address universal basic income, and I do have an issue with the way Andrew Yang is approaching it. I think that universal basic income is a necessary evil that has to come along for us to get to the next stage. Because I think Gene Roddenberry is the one who actually had it right. To all those Trekkies out there, that in time, or over a long enough period of time, we'll reach a point where it's just like money really doesn't mean a whole lot to us anymore.
Yeah, or what does
Why
labor
do we
mean?
need?
Well, what does labor
What's
mean?
that?
I mean, if the more this goes on, I think socialism might even have to re-evolve, because you can have like these, the whole hammer and anvil socialism, but the more technology progresses, we're going to run into a situation where, well, what we're going to have to think about what labor means now, or what working class, where we fit in this, because I think, and I'm not going to say what's going to happen, but it's just hypothetically, my mind just gravitates toward the idea of eventually we're going to have to figure out who owns the means to artificial intelligence, to automation. So you don't have like Jeff Bezos and all these fuckheads that own everything. That just like few people who own these means, they're making profit. The government's giving us money, and it's like, well, what the fuck? Like, what's the point of these people? I think we're gonna run. I don't know. I just feel like eventually we're gonna run into that situation if we have universal basic income. We're gonna run into that. Well, we're just consumers. We're not even workers anymore. We're just dependent on this. I think I don't.
And when you reach that point where. And when you reach that point where it's only consumers and no workers, that is when the rich finally will realize they ate themselves.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, capitalism ceases to make any sense. So
that's right.
Universal basic income, I think it's inevitable for capitalism.
Yes.
Is it necessary? I don't know. I mean, if we did have the means to at least raise class consciousness and bring people to the realization that, hey, we're separate classes here. You got the ruling class; they live in their own society.
Yep.
That's two different civilizations. Hunger Games.
And
it's
they
exactly
do
like
not
that.
give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give. I am repeating George Carlin's words, because George Carlin sat on both sides of the fence, and he said they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you.
Yep.
Period. Stop voting for them. That's exactly right.
All right, man. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I mean, if you're in the Northwest Ohio area, we are doing a canned food drive for the UAW workers. I'm actually currently at one of the, the first location that got on board. It's a place called Pizza Cat. I guess their web address is keepcolonyweird.com. I don't know why that it is, but that's what it says.
It is what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So Pizza Cat, kudos to them. I'm actually meeting the owner today. He was the one at the start of the show who walked up to my car, and I'm like, I'm on the phone. So, I'm out here to support them. I'm going out to the union strike line immediately after this to stand with the union workers for a couple of hours. If you have any doubts on where I stand with issues, I can't show you enough at how much I stand by workers. This includes truckers. This includes auto workers. This includes people who work at Burger King, McDonald's, Subway, Taco Bell. This includes the dishwasher in the back of a Benihana's. This is the person who is sweeping out the shitter at the pilot and the TA. This is the person who is working for the government, getting in the snow plows at 12, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning to make sure the streets are clear. When I say that I'm fighting for the working class, rest assured, I don't give a fuck about the rich people. They have more than enough representation on Capitol Hill. Can we please, for the love of God, in Northwest Ohio is filled with working class farmers, with factory workers, with service industry workers. Guys, start voting for people who are going to actually represent you and who do not want a career in politics, because when my time is done doing my public service, I'm going back to being a fucking teacher, please. Thank you very much. So,
that's great. Absolutely. If anybody wants to check out your website to see your policies, where can they go?
please check out mxc2020.com. So that's my initials, Michael Xavier Carrigan, mxc2020.com.
Awesome.
I also have Facebook, I have Twitter, I have a YouTube channel. If you want to see some of my better rants, definitely the Facebook page, but I do try to post stuff up on YouTube at least once a week if I can do it more. But as we all know, being a trucker, if you're rolling for 10 hours, you have little time for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we're going to wrap this up then.
Yeah.
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 Well, it was a lot of fun having you on here, and great conversation.
Been a blast.
And good luck on your campaign, and we wish the best for you.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, and a big thank you to you guys for allowing me to be able to do this on such a platform to reach our community.
Yes.
Yep.
We hope it gets out there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
What we're trying to do is just try to help you. And when I saw that last interview you had, I felt like, you needed to. I can't think of the words. I'm totally brain dead.
Express.
Thank you. Yeah, express yourself better.
Thank you.
Make it easier for other people to actually be like, oh, it's not just somebody up there for like 5 minutes and then you're done. You got a whole lot more to behind you.
Yeah, and the same thing happened with Bernie Sanders on the Joe Rogan podcast. I know a lot of people on the left don't like him, but that's actually a very good thing. Podcasts are a good way for those who want to get their ideas out without the sound bites. You escape all of that. So, I think I'd like to see more, not just our podcast, of course, I'd like that, but I think more progressives or people, anybody running for office, should continue to do things like this. So, I guess we'll hope you succeed, and we're going to keep talking about you. So.
Yes.
And then one last thing on that is if you'd like to volunteer, definitely let me know. But donations right now, we didn't push hard for donations last quarter because that's when I started. This quarter, we are pushing for donations. And an idea that I had, and I was actually saving this for Tuesday to announce with the Young Turks. But if you guys don't mind, I'd like to announce this now.
Oh, yeah, go right. Yeah.
Right on. It's the $1 campaign.
Okay.
The $1 campaign. If and the way I look at it is this: if the audience, just on the Young Turks alone, they have 4.7 million subscribers. Drop that down to just 10% of them. So 470,000 people were to chip in just $1 would completely change my campaign. And that's just their subscribers. They have 50 million unique viewers, but just the subscribers alone. Just give $1 to a progressive, $1 to somebody who's actually fighting for workers. You want to talk about power in numbers? That right there completely flips an entire campaign. Right now, the guy that I am, because we only mentioned the one guy, Gene, who's kind of the quiet guy, but the other guy that I'm also running against in the primary, he is, in my opinion, he's shown himself to act exactly like a corporatist Democrat, a neocon, neoliberal, I should say. And I'm just like, wow, you've shown your true colors. I know what I'm up against. And he talks about, I've raised $60,000 and I'm going to raise more money and more money. And that's all he focuses on. And I'm like, okay, so if I can just get this one big boost that will change my campaign, it allows a real progressive, not a faux aggressive, a progress or a progressive to actually make it into office.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Or you heard it here first, folks. $1. $1. Donate it to
$1.
Xavier.
That's it. $1.
That's all you got to do. We get your paycheck. $1. And if you could donate more, awesome.
You can
Or can I-
sacrifice one can of Coke to help him out.
Or a
Yeah,
bag
pretty
of-
much.
no.
And it's on Act Blue, but if you go to my website on the donate page, it'll take you straight to the Act Blue page.
All right.
All right.
And what is that again?
The website is nxc2020.com, and the donate button will be right there on the list. Takes you straight to the Act Blue page where you can actually see the TYT interview as well.
All right, man.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot for being on here. And maybe
Thank
we'll
you.
talk to you again some other time.
Cool. All right. Roll safe out there, everybody.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
See you later.
You too.